I use that same resume for like a larger corporation, that might not work. I might instead, for that same side project, need to say my actual stack. Like, what did I use?
And it could go on for like 4 or 5 pages. But if you think about it, right, what it actually helps a recruiter is keep it to max 1 to 2 page, and then keep it to that few words that you have seen in the job description and put that in.
Is it the fact that you feel like you don't get enough applications, so you do active outreach, you attend events which might be appropriate? So it's a kind of different type of shortlisting. You're no longer looking at people's resumes, right? You're talking to them as people.
Go in as a recruiter, people come right to you and say, hey, I'm looking up, can you help me? Can you look at my CVs?
Yeah.
And the thing about that is, I do want to help you, but I think the intention for you to come right at me and tell me I need help and do this, I think that's not appropriate. I talk to the US folks, I do see a lot more quicker decisions, whereas in Singapore it could be a bit slower because we need to unpack that in a couple rounds.
Right. Our friends have been telling us it's the first round that's hard to get through, which is like when they send out the applications but they don't get callbacks or hearbacks. It might be because like it seems like you can't send the same resume to the same role again and again. Like for example, I would tailor my resume to say for a startup to be more like, hey, I dabbled in these side projects, but I did I tried out like being a PM, and I tried out a little bit of this being a designer. But if I use that same resume for like a larger corporation, that might not work. I might instead, for that same side project, need to say my actual stack. Like, what did I use with it?
Yeah.
Would you say, like, in your perspective, when you get all these, like the first round of applications, that might be a source of possible conflict for the applicant, where they put it in, they're like, oh, but I thought my resume was good.
Yeah.
But,
I think we did receive multiple candidates applying for roles, and sometimes, to be honest, when you look at the CVs themselves, right, I mean, they don't actually see the angle as what a recruiter will look at. So they do tend to put or rather they are quite verbose about what they have achieved in their role, and it could go on for like 4 or 5 pages. But if you think about it, right, what it actually helps a recruiter is keep it to max 1 to 2 page. If you want, maybe make the font smaller, make sure that it's all that you want, like highlight the main part that you want to showcase during this whole position that you applied for, right? And then keep it to that few words that you have seen in the job description and put that in, right? So that's how we actually first filter these candidates as well. There are some times that you do see candidates that doesn't really put all that information that you want, but what's interesting is also if you do think that this candidate have potential, you might look beyond the few pages, the first 2 pages, and you might see something like I don't know, like I find some of them have really good experience, but they're not putting it correctly. So we're trying to help them to figure out what do you actually do in your role. But if you're doing a hiring manager led recruitment, means that the hiring managers are the one that do the first screening, they might just miss out this candidate. So there are cases where some of your friends who might be looking might have missed out because they may not be very specific on their first two lines or first page of their CVs, and we actually have to go in as a recruiter to look through again and make sure that did we actually missed out this person, and then look at their tech stack and see if that makes sense. So a lot of keyword and keyword searches for us to make sure that we do the right thing.
Right. Yeah. Now, I want to ask about the second channel, which is actually quite interesting because that's something that we're doing in our community group now. Because of the fact that you feel like you don't get enough applications, so you do active outreach. You attend events which might be appropriate. So it's a kind of different type of shortlisting. You're no longer looking at people's resumes, right? You're talking to them as people.
Yeah.
How is this experience like?
Whether or not it's technical or non-technical, when I go for events, my objective is also first to get the first impression of the person, right? Not necessarily they are a candidate for us, but it could be a good candidate for maybe other companies or my friends who are recruiters themselves who are looking for
that's
candidates
true,
as
'cause
well.
you're a big network as
Yeah,
well,
so we do actually try to share information as much as possible to see if that might be a feed for your company.
Right.
So I think the part about going events and knowing someone is actually much better than doing a phone call. Yeah, because if you think about it, right, a phone call, you basically do a quick initial screening. You don't actually know this person. You don't know what they really do at work. But actually, if you spend time just meeting them in person, sitting there and just figure out how they are as a person, you will also understand or have some insights into how their role really look like. And sometimes meeting them in person, you actually do see a lot more tangible assets that you might not see it during a phone call, right? Because a lot of phone calls you do is very transactional. So we did actually manage to find really good people who may not be actively looking out, and that those conversation turn into surprisingly good conversation that in turn they actually did interview with some of our companies or even for my company as well, and that's something really good, you know, for the firm as well. You know, you learn a lot more than doing phone calls.
I did want to like ask like just a curious question. If there are like in these networking events where in your head you're kind of like looking out for people to possibly recruit, are there certain turnoffs that people when they present themselves that you take note of? Because I know like for me, I remember I had this experience where I was at like it's basically a developer platform, and they were having an event now, and I think somebody thought I was a recruiter because I was wearing a Google Cloud shirt. I'm not from Google Cloud. I just got that shirt from a hackathon or something. But I was wearing it, and there was this like I think she might have been a first year student at like one of the universities here.
Right.
And she kept talking to me about her achievements and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's great. I was recruiting for certain roles for my organization then, and when I started talking about my organization, I think she immediately was like, oh, that's not. I could see the visceral change. Oh, that's not really what I'm looking for. And she straight up like just told me like my aim is to look for like the big few like the Mang companies, because my whole plan is like I want to go into Mang first and then do that internship for like 1-2 years, and then after that maybe do a startup and then have like this robust like whatever thing. But the thing is I thought I was striking a non-transactional conversation with her. You know, I want to get to know you as a person. I don't want you coming in like telling me your CV and stuff like that. I want to get to know you as a person. And I think I was immediately just turned off like the fact that once you found me not like representing a company that you thought I was representing, and you're like, okay, bye. So that was a turn off for me. I was wondering for you as a recruiter, because I don't think you go around with a recruiter tag, right? Like, hey, I'm a recruiter.
No.
Do you have certain turn offs that you don't think like people should be doing if they're really intentional in trying to get a job?
I think because I do attend a lot of events, sometimes I forget that I'm a recruiter. So I was there really specifically like just networking, and I don't actually explicitly say that I'm a recruiter at the start.
True,
Because I do think that something about your role shouldn't define who you are during like an event as well.
That's true.
Because if you go there with the intention that you're a recruiter, sometimes like what you said, I think they can get a bit aggressive. They could tell you like, oh, this is my CV, this is what I do, how I do it, and I'm applying for this, and I want to get into this role, right? But if let's say you don't go in with that intention that you're a recruiter and you're just meeting them as a person, sometimes that perspective is very different. They will talk to you like a normal human being. I do have some turn off as well, but I'm not gonna like name names, but I think there are situations where you go in as a recruiter, people come right to you and say, hey, I'm looking up, can you help me, can you look at my CVs? And the thing about that is I do want to help you, but I think the intention for you to come right at me and tell me I need help and do this, I think that's not appropriate. I think it's just true. You know, understanding and knowing the person first before you ask for help. I think that's a better way to do it.
Have that much decency to like
correct
to like, you know, just don't just oh, you're a recruiter, I need help.
Here's my CV.
Yes.
This is your CV, check it please.
Yes, yes.
You probably wouldn't recommend for people to bring their CVs to events,
No,
right?
no,
Imagining,
I
yeah, because
don't.
you now that I realize like, cause she wouldn't be going for events with only the specific intention. I need to recruit for these roles. Like she's just like, oh, maybe I'll meet like other recruiters. Maybe I'll meet like other companies I might want to work with. It's just like open floor, whatever.
Yeah.
But then for like somebody, I guess, who's like really actively recruiting, I guess the perspective is different. You're very intentional. I need to look for like a recruiter. I need to like know what they're about. So I guess this might be where that disconnect is.
Correct.
Yeah, for some people.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to non-technical and technical recruiting, I do see that there's a huge difference. When it comes to non-technical recruiting, right? People tend to be more, I think they look at the situation as well. They talk to you as a person because they want to get your buy-in, if you think about that. But when you do a technical role, people can be a bit more direct. Not in a bad way. I think it's a good thing. But when they're too direct, they tend to forget the bigger picture around why do you need, this support and how can we help you, right? Because they come in with that intention that I just want to get my objective done, checked off every day.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I did want to ask because you mentioned that you also do global recruiting.
Yes.
So I think like across the board, I've heard that there are differences in people from different cities, that people from different cultures in the way they present themselves during interviews. From what I remember in our conversations, you've done a little bit of US and I assume mostly Asia.
Mostly Asia.
Do you see any differences that you will pick out culturally, like across roles?
Yeah, I do think. I mean, living in Singapore, and for me, Singapore regulations is pretty good. I would say that we have a lot of regulations that are put out there, like TAFET and a few other guidelines, what you should not ask. But when it comes to US recruiting is a whole lot of things to unpack, right? Because you're not supposed to ask about their work sponsorship. You're not allowed to ask about their some of their, I guess, background. And you're actually not allowed to ask a few other things as well, like what's your like that. There's a lot more constrained around that. So when you interview someone, it has to be very, very confined to what this role is and how do we unpack that. And typically we try to be more open, right? Because during interview with maybe in Singapore, candidates may not be as active, like they don't share a lot of things, so you need to ask more questions,
more prompting.
yeah, more prompting on that aspect. But in US it's different. US people do love to have to actually expand into what they do, what they actually have experience in, and they can actually walk you through like how their day-to-day really look like. And sometimes it probably spends like 30-40 minutes for a call, versus in Singapore maybe a phone call, it could take like 10 minutes maximum, because people are very objective. They know what they want to share specifically into what this will look like. But in the US, when you recruit, you actually need to, like when you ask one question, they will tend to share a lot more.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
they like to share information, which is great. And sometimes informations that probably would be very critical for the role could have already been unpacked during that interview, within that phone call as well. Whereas in Singapore, we have to break it down into like multiple, we have to prompt more multiple stages to ask such questions. And how do we actually ensure that we've covered all the questions and actually make the right decision to hire a candidate. Whereas US, I think it's pretty straightforward. People just share a lot, and that's a great thing though. I do see that as a bonus point,
because you don't have to ask as many questions.
I do not ask a lot more questions, because they do tend to know, and I think they do very well in interviews actually. Most of the time when I interview these candidates, like if they do share a lot, they are very specific and they know what this role is, they tend to actually excel really well, and right from the get-go that they're going to get a job. So
Oh.
sometimes you have that feeling that actually, I mean, shouldn't say gut feeling, but we do have that as well as a recruiter, that we do see that, oh, if you do actually share such an information that is so useful for this role, typically we think that, right, if when we share this to the hiring managers, they do buy that in, and most of the time they do get the role. So 50% of my time when I talk to the US folks, I do see a lot more quicker decisions, whereas in Singapore it could be a bit slower because we need to unpack that in a couple rounds.
Right. So you need to understand the individual more. Is this
Correct.
parallel to like your experience? Because I know like your company is international. You have like the US side as well. Would you say that this is what you see of your US colleagues as well? Like,
Definitely, they are a lot more vocal than my local peers. But yeah, I never like looked at it from a recruitment perspective.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
they were just colleagues, and I always just saw them as, they're a bit more expressive and more vocal. And they are the ones who usually bring in more like, oh, how was a weekend? You know, at the start of a stand-up kind of things.
Correct.
But that's interesting that, even in recruitment, it does help them actually, that they're
Yeah,
able
yeah.
to speak, they're able to express their thoughts and still being on point there.
yeah, I mean, not necessarily always on point. You did point out like
Not all.
sometimes,
Yeah, not all,
But you would
actually.
say that
They
this,
might derail.
Yeah.
They do as well. Sometimes that you do see that as a red flag as well. So you don't you don't go all out, because I think
Sure.
ultimately when it comes to interviewing, there's a set of way to do it. So we tend to ask them, specifically that during this interview, we'll start off usually like we'll spend maybe the 20 minutes to uncover your experience, your background, and then we can segue into what this role looks like. So we want to cover that in that 20 minutes call.
Right,
So we try to
right.
set the agenda at the start and or interviews, but of course when it comes to interview as more of a conversation, it turned out that sometimes they do speak longer than 20 minutes. So we need to be very confined into what we want to share, and ask them that please let's just discuss this first, and then we can go back there if we need to.
Right. Yeah, basically kind of achieve that balance. But it's just kind of interesting having this perspective, because like another controversial but kind of like an open secret almost is that, like, especially as Singaporeans or like people in Asia, if you were to go up against an international candidate, a lot of them Americans or from like Europe, they tend to have like an edge, but we don't know what this edge is, and it just becomes like this angry frustration. Maybe they're just picking like the whole Singaporeans tend to say, oh, they always choose foreigners over us, but it's not so much. I think it's about the way of presentation. I think the skill set, I take it as an equilibrium. It's all the same, but it's about the way we present, and this goes into a lot of like cultural values that we're trained to. But now you've really put it in that recruiter perspective that they tend to like be more automatic when it comes to like really sharing and delving deeper into their experiences. So there's less prompting. But for like a Asian Singapore-based candidate, you might have to do more work in terms of prompting. The decisions come a little bit slower, because you're like, okay, he might have said this, but like what did they actually mean? Do we need to come back with another interview
Yes.
to ask more? Like, you're really trying to like, I want to see your potential. So I think these are things that we could really learn from, especially with now, like, we're not just looking at pure applications and interviews. There's also the outreach part of it, going to events and stuff like that. I think that soft skill does play into more of a bigger picture, and we hope to be able to like bring this perspective in an objective manner, both in our women in tech communities as well as our wider tech community. I think these insights have been really helpful. I think all in all, this was really good for both of us. Yeah.
I mean, happy to be here as well. I mean, thanks for inviting me as well. I think it's really great to understand from both your perspective, not just, as a recruiter, because you need to understand what the other person is actually thinking of, and how do they actually perceive recruiting as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there is like really a disconnect, and now I've really realized where that is, and there's a lot more to unpack. But I hope like this episode really helps people understand that it's not about who's better or worse, but it's just like there is a difference in that perspective, and we hope to bring you again for like the next episode. Definitely leave your feedback, leave your comments, so that we know what questions that we can ask next time that we get Joanna back, and have more of her more global perspective, as well as like more generalist recruitment perspectives onto the table, so that we can help everyone, both not just in the tech community but beyond the tech community as well. Yeah, so as always, this was RegTech, the place for Bytes and Banter, and we hope to see you in the next episode. Yeah. Bye!